Peace. Greetings to you all. It is your brother Naheem, BKA Lord Abba, aka Mr. Just the Facts. Tonight, man, we got a little powerful show. We're gonna get into the comments made by Bob Johnson, the former owner of BET, if I'm not mistaken, America's first black billionaire. The second half of our show, we're gonna touch on the Reconstruction period. You know, my brother Dr. Logic is going to go in on that. And I'm going to pull up some things to show how we are still faced with the failures of Reconstruction. Hit the like button, family. Share the link. If you're on Facebook, share it. If you're on Facebook, you could also come over to YouTube and share the link as well. Hit the subscribe button. We trying to grow this channel. Politics and the history thereof is something that is not prevalent in the conscious community. Everything it seems to be like an out, is an escape hatch that people try to use to escape from what's going on in the now. We're trying to expand the platform as well. I want to start taking calls now, and I'm itching to hear what other people have to say. You know, we have some people that come into the chat, usually trolling, but I want to see if those people are brave enough to call in. Also, those who would like to add on to the conversation as well. You could cash at me at Lord Abba. I'm going to put that in the inbox, in the chat. I mean, so we're trying to get a new interface so that I could grow this thing out. Peace to everybody in the chat. Let's go. We're gonna start this thing off. My brother Dr. Logic, want to give a shout out real quick, bro?
Peace, fam. Peace. You know, we just trying to give you the most prevalent and profound information as we develop, you know, what we feel is the best ways to remedy and rectify our situation, and also honor our ancestors. You know, that's what we about, honoring our ancestors and improving our situation. You know, we are, like I say, when me and my brothers on the phone all the time, if you really understand the ADOS story and the history of what we've done in the country in the midst of what we had to face while living here, from being private property and then living under public subjugation and all the accomplishments, we are actually legitimate superheroes. You can't find a story in Marvel or DC Comics that can rival the ADOS story and narrative. But we've been taught it in a way that, you know, in our childhoods and our parents, great parents, we've had this like kind of hidden shame about it. And we never really glorified our history. We've been made to be ashamed. We don't even want to be associated with slavery. No, I wasn't no slave. People, kings and queens, brother. So now that has, you know, kind of diminished our ancestors' honor and their legacy and what they've done for us. So we just here to try to speak that real truth to that real power. And in order to be the power, you got to know where your power comes from. And without honoring your ancestors and learning from what they did and their accomplishments and what they suffered, then you will never be able to continue their work and extend that power into your life today. We're going to get into it tonight.
Yeah, honors, man. Shout out Corey the Black Vegan. He says Sunday's show was fire. Honors, man. Shout out to the brother Nick Music. Shout out to Vino X. I mean, we in the building tonight, so let's go in, right? We're gonna start with Bob Johnson. Something is still wrong with my Microsoft Word application. I tried to have it fixed. I got frustrated too fast. My patience, especially on the days when it's time to do a show, which is usually the only times that I cut my computer on in the first place, didn't feel like being bothered with it. So I took some notes, right? And we're just going to try to hit these notes, hit these points, and then we're going to, you know, just elaborate on some of the points, right? I want to start by saying that Bob Johnson opens up the interview with Charlemagne being very specific about who should get reparations, who he's speaking about. And that's the American descendants of slaves. Of course, he used the term descendants of slaves, which is the same exact thing. Basically, I don't know if he didn't want to say ADOS because we know there's some what they call a blue check, a little blue check backlash against the ADOS movement. But it is what it is. I don't know. I thought the brother articulated his points very well. I was surprised. I actually listened to hear some holes and some flaws, and I personally didn't hear it. And I'm not saying I know what to listen for 1,000%, but I didn't hear any flaws in anything that the brother was saying. Everything that he said was on code with what the ADOS movement has been promoting for the past few years. Now, he spoke about the atonement proponent, meaning making us a whole citizen and how this wealth transfer happened. And if you want to speak to any of these points as I'm bringing them up, just jump in, bro. Like where he spoke about the atonement proponent to reparations, meaning making our people whole. Again, this is another of the terminology that I've only heard used by the ADOS movement over the past year, probably going on 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, one thing that in regards to that first point right there, that I thought when he said that, it really made a whole lot of sense. And I like the way he phrased it. He said a couple things. One thing in particular, he said that Black folks are historically very forgiving people. And if white America could match our forgiveness with their apology, that would be a start to move in the right direction right there. And he gave some very clear examples. He said that when that brother who was sitting in his own home was killed by a cop who walked into his home thinking it was her home and killed him dead, the first thing his brother did was ask the judge to go hug her and say he forgives her. He gave another example. I can't remember right now, but he spoke about
the church.
Exactly. That when what was his name? Dylan Roof went into that church and killed 9 people. One of them, this part always gets left out. One of them, I believe it was the pastor, was a state senator. Like how does that get left out? And now I'm going to attention on that because that really infuriates me. They always leave that out. So he kills 9 people in the church, one of them a publicly elected official. And then the first thing the church members do is, ask for forgiveness. Let's forgive the brother. So we've proven that we are a forgiving people, but they have not proven that they are willing to even apologize. And before you can start or begin atonement, you have to at least be apologetic in spirit and application. So I thought that was a very good point that he made. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there's something. Oh man, I don't know what just happened.
No,
Were you finished making your point?
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that.
It was crazy. I was hearing double. I had clicked on the YouTube video to respond to some of the comments directly at YouTube. So I guess the lag, it sounded like you were still talking. All right. So one of the things that he spoke about was that we fought in every war.
Fought in every war.
When you look at that movie Lincoln, if I'm not mistaken, the movie opens up with the scene where it's been a minute since I've seen the movie, but I think it opens up with a scene where Lincoln is addressing a black troop of soldiers or something to that effect. And if you look up the legal definition of nation, where's my Black's Law Dictionary? I don't know. I was buried in some of my books somewhere. But one of the definitions of nation and nationality is one of those two. It's been a while since I looked at it. Is owing an allegiance to the place that you are a citizen of, basically. And we have shown on this show, on the Be the Power show, that the right of suffrage was granted to us. We exercised the voting right since the times of the Articles of Confederation. This is a form of allegiance to the country because we voted for the representatives who would soon go on to ratify the Constitution of these United States of America. That's why we got to stop letting people say that the Negro is not a monolith. And if they're going to say that, then they have to define what they mean by that. Or black people are not a monolith. They have to define exactly what they mean by that when they say that, because the arguments made in that day was, well, there can't be a difference between the Negro in the North and the Negro in the South if they are one race. And in the North, they have voted and are free to vote and help ratify the Articles of Confederation, which became our Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same thing with us fighting in the wars. The GI Bill, for instance. I mean, we came home to nothing. People came home from the war and was able to live their best lives. There's a documentary that touches on this. I don't know if it's a whole documentary or a portion of a documentary where this brother goes out to the Hamptons in New York to try to get a home, and he's told no Negroes can live out here. Did you want to speak to that real quick, bro?
No, not really. We can move on. I want a point that I'm reading some comments, and there's a point that I think is real important to get after. I want to touch on what you just said in the Reconstruction half of the show.
Okay, definitely. So one of the things that he spoke about was, as you brought up, the apology and white apology in contrast to our forgiveness, because we are a forgiving people. So one of the things that I wrote in parentheses was whites can help by pushing reparations. And I meant to bring up the statistics that show how many American citizens, polled that are against reparations. I think if we take that poll right now, with the groundswell that has been caused by the ADOS movement, shout out to Yvette and Tone, of course, with the current climate, Bob Johnson, just yesterday, Sandy Darity did an interview on CNBC eloquently laying out why we need reparations. I mean, he really broke it down, and it was just a perfect 5 or 6 minutes of why we need reparations. So I think that, like my brother Josh said on one of his posts, and I brought up on the last show, it's time for that energy that y'all are putting into these protests. It's time for y'all to put that into our reparations push. I want to bring up a point real quick that when I was at the protests in my city, the group that was hosting the protests, they was screaming like, we need y'all white dollars. We don't just need y'all out here supporting. There was a lot of them, quote unquote, white people coming out their pockets. They would donate, and they were like, where is the collection plate, if you will, or where can I cash app you or send our donations to? And we need that same that same push for our reparations. Bending and kneeling, as Pelosi did in the disgraceful display of wearing kente cloth with the useless Congressional Black Caucus. I mean, that does nothing. That does nothing to help us. Are you going to address the problem of the racial wealth gap? And let me see. Because there was something that Charlamagne asked. I don't know, man. Charlamagne's questions, like when you're talking to a rapper, you know exactly which questions to ask. When you're talking to a politician, you don't seem to understand or know how to frame the questions properly. So I'm going to get to that, right? He he spoke about government. Matter of fact, was the next point. Bob Johnson spoke about how government will help us if we ask for welfare, Section 8, programs, et cetera, but they won't give us no money. They won't give us the direct payments that they owe us. Again, remember when Barack Obama was asked about reparations, his first response is the conditioned political response: education. We have to invest in better education. And so one of the things that Charlemagne asked Bob Johnson, I don't know if he was listening. He could have been distracted. Sometimes I'm distracted. I'll be looking at the chat and trying to read the chat and post the comments up on the screen. Sometimes I don't even be hearing what everybody be saying on the panel. So that can happen. So I'm going to excuse that. Charlemagne asked him right after he got finished breaking it down, we don't need programs and all of this stuff coming from the government. Give us our money. Don't worry about how we're going to spend it. We're going to take care of ourselves. So Charlemagne turns around and asks him the question, do you think that money would be better invested in education and programs, et cetera, et cetera? I'm like, my God, did you not just hear this dude? But to give him the benefit of the doubt, sometimes you can be distracted running the show. I was on the last show and I said Sharpton was doing the protests in November. I don't know where in the world I got November from. Clearly it was August. I had seen it earlier. I just forgot which month. I don't even know why I said November. When I listened back to it, I was like, why in the world did I say November? So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that one, right? But Bob Johnson came back and just eloquently broke down some of what Tone expressed in his video the other day and what we expressed in our video Sunday. And he said, Bob Johnson said, would you care about education? Right? Would you care, or would you care about if your son, in the case of Mike Brown, allegedly, I'm going to use the term allegedly, stole some cigarillos, or Eric Garner having to sell loose cigarettes outside of a store, or Alton Sterling selling DVDs, getting shot, murdered, executed, or George Floyd having to pass off a counterfeit $20 bill. If you got reparations, that wouldn't be an issue. That begins to solve most of a lot of the problems in the first place. I want to bring my brother Ali Bey. I told you I'm calling him the professor, aka the professor, is in the building. Peace, bro.
Peace. What's up? What I miss?
Not much. We just getting into it.
We just breaking down some of the points of Bob Johnson's. I'll just run through them real quick. Bob Johnson was specific about who gets reparations. The descendants of slaves. The term he used, or the term we use, is American descendants of slavery. He spoke about the atonement proponent, make whole, wealth transfers from slavery into where we're at now. We fought in every war. He spoke about white apology as a juxtaposition to our
forgiveness,
our mercy, because we are a forgiving people.
He said government. He said they need to match us with their apology. The way we're forgiving, they need to match us with their apologies.
Facts.
Yeah,
facts. I agree. Absolute facts. He spoke about how the government will help us if we ask for Section 8, welfare, different types of programs. They'll dump money into that. And see, when you start getting into that, there's so much pork in those bills. That's a political term for those that don't know, that go to all of this other stuff that by the time the program really hits your area, I mean, you've seen nothing. You've seen a new playground.
Yes, I want to speak directly to that too, right? You said a lot, and I really want to kind of, flesh some of that stuff out. So for one, right, who should get it? We have to take time, right? So there's a couple things in the who should get it, because shortly after that, I don't know if it was right before, the same day, or the day after, Fox came out and they did a little piece on reparations, and they talked about They got, so we're doing the work. We're making some progress because people are saying that it should go to the descendants of slavery, and that's, we need to understand that. But they haven't been paying complete and full attention because the numbers are still off a little bit. And or Fox coming out saying 14 trillion. That's way better than Marion Williams's 900 billion or whatever she had going on. Like, I'm not okay. I know that I think the consensus is 20 million, and there's some other things. I think Dr. Garrity said just lost wages alone. It's like 8.9 million, and that's not even talk about punitive and damage restitution. But so the 14 trillion, okay. To me, I'm not mad at that number. But when you say that there's 42 million Black people in America, right? I want to, if you can share my screen real quick, brother. We need to understand. We need to stick to this criteria. We need to go ahead and correct people when they make the statement, right? We have to understand that if we stick to this criteria, because it's all the work, and this is the thing, I don't have to do no work. The work has been done for you. Thank the ancestors for great minds like Dr. Sandy Darity, Antonio Moore, Yvette Carnell, and others, right? So who should receive it? That's what we talk. There's strict and clear specific criteria set out. One, and let me highlight it so everybody know where I'm at. All right. One, an individual would have to provide reasonable documentation of at least one ancestor enslaved in the United States, and part two to that, they would need to demonstrate that they have identified as Black, African American, colored, or Negro on established legal documents for at least 10 years prior to the onset of the program, right? So you can't just hurry up and automatically reparations is about to get passed. Oh, we Black, we Negroes, we colored too. No, because these are the badges of our inherited disadvantage that come from slavery, right? Our lineage. We're not gonna let y'all steal our legacy like that, because people really just want to steal what is ours. We just got to call a spade a spade. But this is the real meat and potatoes of it right here. We have to understand this, right? In addition, we would add that at least one grandparent fulfills both prongs of the criteria if a person is biracial. And right, effectively, this would limit reparations solely to those people who have lineage that ties them into slavery in the United States. That's what it's about. And the subsequent era of Jim Crow. Any Black immigrant who came to the United States voluntarily after slavery would not be eligible to receive reparations. That's what people are missing. We got to understand that, pre-1965 group of Black immigrants mostly originated from Caribbean, and as such would have their own particular claims against European nations for the harms that they suffered based on slavery instituted in the Caribbean or their origin country, right? So we have to keep this thing framed right. We have to keep it rooted, because before 1965, Black people of foreign birth residing in the United States were nearly invisible. According to the 1960 census, there was a percentage of the population was to the right of a decimal point. Importantly, and then we go to talking about, the groups being just like college students who came here voluntarily. That's not, reparations worthy. You're not, what are you repairing in that instance, right? So now we're going to talk about that this 42 million that they're talking about is going to shrink. It's going to shrink. Reparations for American child slavery would exclude Black immigrants, populations that voluntarily migrated to America, who since 1980 have undergone an unprecedentedly sharp expansion, increasing from 816,000 in 1980 to 4.2 million as of 2016. After deducting these foreign-born Blacks and their offsprings conceived by two parents who didn't descend from American child slavery, this group shrinks considerably. We have to understand that part of it right there.
And I meant to bring up this image, man, I put it in our inbox because I wanted to bring it up. It's been so many people have sent me that thing. I should be able to I don't feel like scrolling through all of the inbox messages I've got. But there's a screenshot that's floating from Fox News. Let me see if I can find it. I put it in there with the intent of sharing it. And the screenshot came from, for whatever reason, it's not in the inbox. I'm looking at now.
What was it up? What was it?
It's a screenshot of Fox News. They did
with them.
Yeah. I wanted to pull that up because I thought that was important.
I might have find it because I know somebody that posted it too.
Yes, if you can find that, definitely, bro. And I think that that's important in conjunction to Camelback off of what my brother Where L was just reading from ADOS101.com. Everybody should go to that website and understand the plan that's laid out. Like my brother said, all the work is done. Brother Sandy Darity, the elder, he wrote a book called From Here to Equality. Him and another woman, I forget her name at the moment. And they have done all the research. The research is already done. We could really just kind of skip right past HR 40 and just hand them that book, which I've started listening to on Audible already. So on that image, it showed that they called it Bob Johnson's reparations plan. I thought that wording was a little funny because I believe Bob Johnson and Trump are buddy-buddy. So, Fox News giving it that title. I mean, it is what it is. We could debate about that, right? But
I mean, it's from his perspective.
It's his perspective, definitely. Now, they had his number, which he said on the Breakfast Club, was $14 trillion. But they had it on the screen to 45 million of us. And
42. So, they said 42.
42 million? Okay, yeah. So when you take out the non-ADOS element, keeping that same 14 trillion, because it's old to us. Darity said in his interview with CNBC, as a collective group of blacks and white, in contrast, the gap is, I believe he said $800,000. $800,000 is what separates the average one of us from the average one of them in collective wealth, if I'm memorizing it correctly, right? So, yeah, Bob.
So in 2016 census said that the foreign-born was, I just read it. It was it 4.2 million, right? So you can go ahead and subtract that right on out of there. And I don't know, according to the 2020 census, we'll see how that number has grown since then. But yeah, we can already subtract at least what we know is 4.2 million from that 42 million right now.
Here's what I think about it, right? It doesn't even matter because if we follow the criteria that's laid out on the roadmap to reparations, ADOS101.com, if we follow that criteria, it doesn't matter what number, whether they say 42 million blacks, because at the end of the day, the criteria will determine who's actually eligible for reparations and who's not. So if they don't meet the criteria, that the census number really doesn't even matter. That wouldn't matter. It's not going to affect anything. As long as we can follow that criteria, we should be good.
Now, we have it up on the screen. They have it at $350,767 in one-time cash payments, over 42 million African-American eligible descendants. To be Fox News, I was shocked to see this. I just got to be honest with you. Calculation based on income, education, savings, home ownership.
We got to get rid of that right off the bat.
Yeah, I don't like how that sounds at all.
Right off the bat. That has nothing to do with it.
That's right.
Bob Johnson actually said that in his show. He was like, I don't care how much money you make. You owe what you owe, from the top of the top to the bottom of the bottom. Here we're talking about Bob Johnson, right? Who's one of the wealthiest black men in America and has been for quite some time. And this is a wake-up call to these pretend do-for-selfers, these
right.
pretend rich black brothers. You know, so I don't even want to call them pretend, but they're not who they pretend to be. They're little guys compared to people. If we got Byron Allen,
that's right,
and we have Bob Johnson in support of reparations, who are these other guys?
You got Ice Cube.
Underneath
you got Ice Cube, you know, and who are these little guys who say we don't need reparations?
So when you say little guys, I mean, the first people I think about is like a Boyce Watkins, Jay Morrison, and we got to call them out because these are the people that were against reparations. And those that come across this show, those people have very large followings. And of course, many of us follow these guys' page on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But they have to be called out because these were the people, and it's already documented, that were against our reparations for some do-for-self.
Ben Carson, good one. That's another one.
So it's like we gotta
put that in there.
We have to like really.
Yeah, Ice Cube net worth 160 million, and he's talking about reparations.
Talk about reparations. These are big dogs talking. Now you start to shift the conversation. Now justice.
Because you can't call it handouts no more. You can't call it handouts no more.
That's a fact.
You got these big dogs saying that it's justice, man.
You know what Darity did that was so. He snuck this dope little jab in there in his CNBC interview. He said that they took the 40 acres that was promised to us away from us and then gave handouts of 160 acres.
That was a cold piece.
Yo, he snuck that in there real nice.
That was nice.
That was
160 acres, like what, under the
Homestead Act.
The Homestead Act. Yeah, Western Expansion Plan. Martin Luther King said something very profound in that same vein. He was like, only when, black folks and like poor people demand money from the government is it called like a handout. Dr. King went further to say the government gives out millions and millions of dollars every single year to rich folks and wealthy folks, and they call it subsidies. So anytime the welfare comes from the government to rich folks and wealthy folks, they call it subsidies. But when you give it to people like us, it's called a handout. No, we got to understand. See, they can only get that one over on us when we don't know any better. That's why we're trying to get you to understand. We got to get you to understand. I'm still just like Bob Johnson. That man said, if you're going to make us equal, you got to make me equal with what matters most in America. And that's in a capitalist society, that's money. That's capital. Money. Make me equal in wealth and make me equal in access to wealth and access to capital. Then we won't have to talk about all this other goofy stuff. Like Charlemagne, well, don't you think education is important? The way he replied, he said, brother, I knew he was like kind of losing his patience with Charlemagne at that moment. He was like, brother, if you had all of the money that you wanted, would you really be concerned with education, right? And would education be outside of your grasp if you had all the money that you wanted? Education wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem.
And then he start giving the examples of Eric Garner, et cetera, et cetera. What you
and he said all those brothers was killed over $40 combined.
$40. Oh man, that breakdown
that was crazy.
Yeah, that breakdown was excellent.
But yeah, and if you had all the money you want, if you needed education, you could pay for it with no problem.
Yeah, and that was it. I love the way he said it because Mike Brown's mom or even Mike Brown himself could have owned the cigarillo store. He wouldn't have to steal no cigarillos. He could open up his own cigarillo store. The brother wouldn't have had to sell Lucy's outside. He would have owned the store and been selling it on the inside. You understand? The brother wouldn't have had to have a counterfeit 20 because he could have had a whole pocket full of 20s and hundreds if he would have had the wealth historically owed to him by way of his lineage that was stolen from us. Like this was really legitimate criminal activity. A lot of us look at it as just like some fairy tale history story. And I don't know how we got there because we talking about our blood relatives. How do you talk about your blood relatives damage and destruction as if it's some fairy tale that just, exists in some nonfiction storybook? This is our history, people.
Yeah. And just to go further, like the military from 1775 to 1855, the United States military were granting 160 acres of lands to veterans of that organization All that time, 160 acres of land called the bounty land warrants, right? This is what they were doing. And even before that, you had, in the colonial era, you had Europeans granting, quote unquote, granting themselves land under the head right system. People could look that up too, where you would get 50 acres of land for each person that you imported into the colonies to either be your servant or slave or whatever. And so if you had 3 people that you imported into the colonies, you would get 150 acres of land just from having those 3 people as your servants. And at the time, think about this, which is crazy. Those people were in servitude for a certain amount of time, where they could, after a certain amount of time, their servitude was up, and those people would still have that 150 acres of land. That's crazy.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah, look, people can look that up. The head rights system.
Oh yeah, the head rights, man.
The military land grants. This is even before the Homestead Act, where they was granting land to white men by the hundreds of acres at a time. I mean, that's something that they've been doing, and it's just so crazy because they try to make it seem as if that all of this wealth, we're not talking about income, but all of this wealth that they've accumulated over these years was somehow done by way of them working hard and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, or just being these really smart people. That's not what happened.
No, that's right. That put us in this position that we're at today, where of all private U.S. agricultural land, whites account for 96% of the owners, 97% of the value, and 98% of the acres. These are all financial echoes of slavery and Jim Crow policies, reflecting and reverberating our society today. Like, did you hear those numbers? They own all of the land, and this is also right. Failures that stem from when the Civil War was over and Reconstruction was supposed to build this new America. It was hijacked and overthrown. And the statesmen that we have put in there to represent us were murdered. They murdered like at least 53 public officials, murdered them. And then they ran people out of office. This is like the most heinous criminal acts, right? So like we're gonna
get into that on the second. We're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into that, man. We're gonna get into that. All right, what's this you have pulled up, Brother Ali?
This is from the National Archives and Records Administration, talking about the bounty land warrants for military service from the period of 1775 to 1855 in the United States. So it says during that time period, the United States granted bounty land warrants for military service, primarily to encourage volunteer enlistments, but also to reward veterans for service during the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican War, and a variety of Indian wars and Indian removals and other military actions during the 1850s. Early warrants could only be used in military districts, principally in Ohio and several other public land states, the former Northwest Territory. Eventually, Congress expanded eligibility to include service in the regular Army and Navy, as well as other volunteer militias. So I just wanted people to see that for a long time, since the birth of the United States, 1775, pretty much, these people have been granting themselves land by 160-acre plots at a time. You understand what I'm saying? And so, I mean, I just don't understand people that don't. You know what it is? People don't know the history, and so they believe that this thing is about bootstrapism. That's not bootstrapism. That's theft.
Facts.
Self-enrichment.
They took our boots and gave it to them.
Yeah, they took our boots. Facts. Remember, I had brought up we was watching Rosewood, and he was like, "That nigga got a piano. I ain't got a piano. How that nigga get a piano and I ain't got a piano?"
Economic envy.
Right. And economic envy. And like, man, we're gonna get into a lot of that on the second half of the show. Let me run through some more of these points that I got written down.
Yeah.
Let me see. He said America helps everyone except us, right? He spoke about how America helped the French in their, I think it was the railroad claim. I should have wrote that out, but it was something that I had shared last year sometime, an article about how America helped the French pay reparations or something to that effect. And Bob Johnson spoke about that, about how it was something about a lawsuit between the Jews and the French, and the French agreed to pay America some money if something happened with the lawsuit. It said, I can't remember offhand. I should have wrote that out. And I thought I would have remembered it because it's something that I actually read last year, but I'm trying to get through these points as well. And he said that was reparations. When you think about how much money goes to Israel from every administration, I'll never forget during the middle of a recession, Barack Obama signed a bill allocating $60 billion with a B, $60 billion to Israel while we're struggling. I know I was struggling. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was in all type of MLM, multi-level marketing, selling coffee and a whole bunch of stuff. Down here in Georgia, the jobs was $7.25 per hour. And it was people were packed up in there just trying to get a little bit to eat. I'm like, this can't be life. This can't be life. Thoughts of going back to hustling had entered my head on many of occasions. I could share that with y'all. It is what it is. So, he gave an analogy about catching up. He said, if whites, right, are 10 yards ahead and we're both running at 5 miles per hour, he said, I can never, ever catch up to them. If we're both running at the same exact speed, I would never catch up to them. And I thought that was a telling analogy, a telling way to explain the gap that we are so far behind. And I think the economist said it will take 200 years for us to catch up to white wealth just by income alone, which means that their wealth would have to freeze. They would have to stop growing wealth. And we know that that's just not going to happen. Let me see. We touched on that already. All right. Yeah, we touched. I took the points down, the major points that I really wanted us to touch on insofar as Bob Johnson's interview with the Breakfast Club. I thought it was masterful. Of course, I listened with a leery eye and leery ear, because we always seen people since the ADOS movement started popping, trying to get in front of the movement by any means that they can. You had to punch somebody in their face, and then tried to blame ADOS for it. Then the guy was like, I'm not even with that group. It's just a whole, but you had suckers like Talib Kweli. I'm going to always call this dude a sucker. I pray we run into each other one day. Talk greasy online. You better be able to back that stuff up when you see the people you talking greasy to.
Somebody ran up on him somewhere, man, and he called the cops.
Yeah, he started calling the cops. I mean, I'm like, what? This how you giving it up? You was talking that Brooklyn stuff when we was on Twitter. But anyway, let me stop digressing. The streets coming out of me. But so anything y'all wanted to add to that? What were y'all takeaways from it? Any of the questions? I thought Charlemagne's questions were silly. I don't think that they were probing questions based on the fact that he was asking questions to points that Bob Johnson had already given. So what were some of y'all's takeaways?
Yeah. Well, one thing that you were saying when he made that statement, I thought that was a good statement too, but I like Yvette explained it in a different way. She understands like just talking about making us equal. I understand that that's a start, right? And I understood where he was coming from, but just making us equal, that's not justice, right? So if somebody stole something from me, right, deprived me of wages and being able to invest my own equity, my own value into my own life, and then they're able to excel. Then they are able to be propelled. The federal government and state governments through land grants and land grant colleges to teach them how to farm the land, and they give them more money to teach them how to mechanize the land and do all these great, wonderful things for themselves, because of the basis of independence in America is land ownership. So they took all of this from us. They've created all of these baskets of generational wealth, and then you just bring me up to where they're at right now. Doesn't really give me justice. It's good. Thank you. But to really be justice is America is the place of interest, right? What is the interest on what you owe me, right? Because so the longer you don't pay me what you owe me, the more interest.
The more, no,
you understand?
Hey, Noble Drew Ali, I'm gonna shout out my prophet. He said that one day the European is gonna have to pay off for the work that our ancestors did in slavery and pay off in compounded interest. So every day that goes by, interest is adding up. So y'all better get on y'all job, America.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, think about this. Somebody did a really good analogy that I saw on Twitter, where they was trying to explain to a European about how it has accrued in terms of the interest on it or what have you. So he said, think about it like this. If you bought $1,000 worth of stock in Apple in 1980, when I think it was 1980 that they did their initial public offering.
Mm-hmm.
Say if you bought $1,000 worth of stock in 1980 during this IPO, right now it would be somewhere around $430,000. $430,000 in terms of its value.
That's right.
So the same thing when you're looking at the wealth and the interest rate on the wealth and everything else that we've been locked out of from the time of slavery, from the time of emancipation on forward. You know, you have to add that into it. You have to. There's no way to not do that. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, man. And just I want to go ahead. I want to reiterate that point, because the best takeaway I have from the Bob Johnson, and I wasn't really thinking about this because I'm also one who, from having a political background, I understand that we need, certain institutions and certain programs and everything. But Bob, he was responding to a question that was asked of him. But he said, if you're going to start somewhere, if you're going to start in a capitalist society, and if you're going to start with something that matters the most in America, it has to be the money. Give me the money. Give our people the money so that we can prove our self-worth. We can prove and have our self-determination. Because even if, bear with me for a minute, let's just say we went with that projection that we just showed up on the screen that Fox had. And let's just say every individual got $350,767.
Mm-hmm.
How would that change your life right now?
That would change your life. That's life changing. Crazy. I mean, if you broke it down to, I don't even want to say 50,000 a year. Some of us are so far behind that I don't even think doing it that way would help. I think 100K a year, right? If we're serious about doing it, I think that if you spread it out 100K per year over the next 4 years, right? That's life changing. That's life changing. It is. It helps.
Yeah, and so many people need it. And when Bernie Sanders, for all my burners out there, the burn bros or whatever they call themselves right now, with Bernie Sanders talked about, we're living in a world where we are seeing the largest disparity in wealth. And in the history of humankind, he says, this is the biggest wealth gap that we've ever seen. And if we have, through Tone, Yvette, Dr. Darity, and this continual work been done, we've proved it with the data. It's been proven with the data that Black folks are at the bottom of that. So what we're really saying is Black folks are experiencing the worst wealth inequality in the history of mankind. So if you're going to address wealth inequality and wealth disparities, you have to, it's just like a medical treatment or a medical triage. You give the aid and the help to the people that need it the most first. They get prioritized in the triage, right? So we are in the most economic dire straits. So we need to help now. You understand? And the money is what we need first. Give us the money. You know what I'm saying? Give us the money, period. And even Brother Abbott said I agree with him, we are still way behind. But even if you got $50,000 a year guaranteed, that still would do so much for your life. I think that number is still too low as well. I'm in agreement with him, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, but look, if you reduce that 42 million down to actual ADOS, that 14 trillion spreads out a little bit more. So you're possibly talking about 400K and better. And I think that over 5 years or something like that, I mean, that is life-changing. That's reparations.
But also look at this, like, now understand, this is to every individual. And I don't know everybody in the chat situation, but me, I'm married, I got 4 children. That's 6 of us, right? So if it was just 350,000 without the other that had on there, we're just gonna use the whole number, 350. That would be 2,100,000 that my family got. I can work with that. I don't know who can't. If you can't, if that's not enough for anyone else. That's I can't speak for no one else, but I can work with that. I don't know what y'all can do, but just between me and my wife alone, that'd be $700,000. And I'm not saying that that's going to be the best thing that could ever happen. But if you want to start somewhere, I think I will be at that starting point.
Let's talk about what
let me introduce Brother Josh real quick before you go in, Ali. We got our brother Josh in the building. Our analyst is in the building. Peace, Josh. What's going on?
Peace. What's going on, y'all?
Ain't nothing.
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
So I was gonna say, let's talk about what we were talking about on the phone about the Jordans and the Gucci, and you know, they say that you ain't gonna do nothing but spend. So you get $700,000 between you and your wife. Y'all gonna buy $700,000
worth the Jordans and Gucci. Yeah, come on, you be Gucci'd out.
Be Gucci'd out. Have a whole house made out of Jordan shoe boxes. Right. You can make a whole house out of Jordan shoe boxes.
Come on.
But on the spirit of that, on the principle of it, whose business is that? That's not no reason for you to pay me what you owe me. Give me my bread. If I want to spend it all on Jordans and red bottoms, get out my business.
Let's go back real quick. I want to go back to this book, The Bloody Shirt, because it has the starting point of this sentiment of what would happen if we get money, right? It says, it's talking about this guy that lost his slave. He said he was nice to him. He don't understand why they want to be free, right? So it says, how much does he pay his people? The colonel was asked. No money wages. If you give money to a nigga, he goes and spends it for whiskey. And I have no intention of making the country any more unsafe to live in than it is at present. Let me see. Oh, all right. It says, besides, sir, and Mr. W will tell you the same. They are not worth it. A white man will do the work of 3 niggas, and 1 slave did more than 3 of these freedmen. You see? So when I'm gonna call Brother Nori out again because I had to repost Brother Wesley Muhammad's. I had to repost Brother Wesley Muhammad's post that he made. I don't like, what's the purpose of the Nation of Islam at this point? Because if you got a brother talking about we just recklessly spend our money and we don't know what we're doing, you sound just like these Europeans, these white people, these racist Southerners from the 1800s that felt that if they gave us money, we wouldn't do any work. Although the person that was doing the research in the South, that was writing the reports that I'm reading from, said everywhere he went where there was work, our people were working, which is a perfect segue into the next portion of our.
Can I just say?
My bad. Yeah, go ahead, Josh. Definitely. And then when you finish, real quick, give your take on what you thought about Bob Johnson's interview with the Breakfast Club.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to like the separatists and the separatism call. First off, like, I don't know why, like, all the people that want to be separate and they're calling for separatism, what's stopping them from being separate? Right. That's the question I would like to ask. Are they waiting for all of us to separate at one time and then that's how we separate? So how can you have separation without reparations? That's what I want to understand. Can somebody explain that for me? How can you have separation without reparations?
Well, what happened is what happened after the Civil War. They separated us from the plantations and they put 4 million people into homelessness and into poverty. And if you try to separate without what you're owed, you're going to be going right into the same conditions.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, we had the de facto segregation essentially was separation, but we still were in a situation where we largely were in poverty. And again, I would invite everybody to go back and watch some of our past shows, especially the last show when we broke down, how the do for selferism, how Elijah essentially called for reparations and what do the Muslims want, and then through Richard Nixon, trying to get some assistance, thinking that, Nixon's administration might be amenable to giving them some government contracts, started to, stop. It was a gag order basically put out. And again, I'm saying this, so I would hope anybody that has information that disproves this comes out. But so far, nobody's taking that challenge. But if you can show that what I'm saying is not right, please do. But look, it was talked about how it was a gag order put out in 1970 to where the Nation of Islam couldn't even speak out against anything against Richard Nixon because they were trying to get contracts from the government, and the government didn't give out anything. But the language of do for selfism still permeates today. How does that make any sense, especially knowing the economic data? So I would just say, look, man, y'all need to get on code. I know your doctrine and your point of view has been long standing, and I know it's maybe wrapped up into your religious doctrine because you've merged the two. But today, I mean, you cannot have separation without try to fight to make sure we get reparations first. Then we can see about your separation. But I can't see about no separation until I get my reparations. So I wanted to say that in regards to that. But did you have anything you wanted to add on that before I get my take on the Bob Johnson?
No, I was just going to ask you, what did you think about the Bob Johnson piece? That was it.
Oh man, I mean, I look at it like we need all the voices and the advocates we can get.
I agree.
One of the things I got from Dr. Darity's book was, and it's something that we probably all agree with and have been saying before, but was we need our people to be on board first. Like it's a shame. Yeah. Like I did a Facebook poll on my Facebook story, and I put a poll in there. I said, "Hey, is the recent events of the Amy Cooper incident, Ahmaud Arbery, then you got Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. Did those recent events influence you to make you feel like that America should pay reparations to its descendants of slavery?"
Excellent poll.
Excellent poll.
Yeah,
oh yeah,
appreciate that. But I published the results. I think it said like 71% believe. Yeah, said yeah. They feel like they're more likely. Well, they feel like we should do that more now. They feel more strongly about it now after these events. 21% said no, they don't think we should do reparations. And I'm like, but guess what? Those two people were our people. They were. I don't know if they were ADOS people. They were so-called black folks.
Wow.
That said no.
Say that again, John.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the people that said no were black folks. I'm like, this is like some sick, like you said, this is a sick trick bag, some sick psychology that we've been playing. I think in part it goes back to the same social engineering program for Richard Nixon that we see.
I mean, it probably goes back.
Perpetrating.
Probably goes back way before that. But that made me think about Again, I gotta cite my prophet Noble Drew Ali when he says, I want to read real quick. He said, "Come, good people, because I, the prophet, sent to redeem this nation from mental slavery, which you have now, need every one of you who think that your condition can be better. This is a field open to strong men and women to uplift the nation and take your place in the affairs of men. If the Europeans and other nations are helping me, why not you? It is your problem. The Negro problem is being solved as it can." And, of course, he was promoting for the organization at that time. But he basically said, the Negro problem is your problem. This is your problem. If the Europeans and people from other nationalities are helping me, why are you not helping me? So when you brought up the results of that poll, that more people who we would identify as ADOS said that they wouldn't agree or don't agree with or haven't been strengthened by current events to give us reparations, then what in the world? Like the Europeans is helping us. Why not you? He talked about that mental slavery. So
yeah. And I just to follow up. But go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that's where when you saying like where does that come from? That is a poison that has existed in our people through our that inhumane treatment of slavery. Even if you go back to all the slave revolts and when we were trying to fight that first epic battle, which is getting rid of chattel slavery, when we won that fight, right? We lost other fights, but during that fight, our main opponent was our own people. Harriet Tubman and Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner and many countless others were fighting our own people. And it was the European allies that made that Underground Railroad a successful thing. So we can't be too poisoned, right? We have to understand that a certain amount of our people are so poisoned with the sickness of racism and the damage that have been done to them that they're just not.
Okay, we got one. Wait, hold on. We got one. We brother Donald Cox Bay. Honors Islam to you, brother. Let's put this brother's comment on the screen. Let's address this real quick before we move on. Collecting as a race, we have 1.3 trillion in purchasing power. That will make us the 16th largest economy in the world. We must learn how to pool our resources. Today, we have approximately 8 billionaires that can pool and coordinate their efforts to build thriving communities in specific locations. By the way, I brought Apple stock 13 years ago, as well as Facebook stock in 2012. I am a living example of investing and building wealth. In 1984, okay, let's get to this 1.3 trillion in purchasing power. The census, and I can't get to my PDF right now. I'm just bothered right now that I can't get to my PDF right now because I have all of that information. The census showed our spending for 2018, our collective incomes rather, right? And it was over $900 billion. It didn't even hit $1 trillion. So there's this myth that we have this great spending power. Wow.
You should ask him where's his source. Ask him.
Yeah. Matter of fact, brother, if you can put your source in the chat. Post your source. We want to see your source because the sources that we have come from the Census Bureau, which says that we only had in collective income $900 billion for the year of 2018, while the Europeans, if my memory serves me correctly, was 7 trillion. When I broke that down with all so-called black people, it came out to $22,000 a year. And when I was doing a debate with Brother Reggie, I was showing how my rent is $800 a month. That's, I think, $9,600 or $9,400 a year out of $22,000. I still got other bills, car note, gas, food, electricity.
Insurance.
Where are you getting this spending power from?
Insurance.
Let's pause real quick. The brother said something that's really making my head hurt. He said that will make us the 16th largest economy in the world. Economies are not how any of this works. Let me say this. Economies are not built on spending. You understand?
Mm.
They're built on a gross domestic product.
Right. I was going to
They
say that.
produce something.
Production.
So you don't have no production power. You don't have no economy.
That's
you
right.
can't build an economy on consumerism. Come
That's
on,
right.
man. Like, man.
And also, that money had to be spent in the richest nation in the world, which is also one of the most expensive nations in the world, where
That's right.
where the larger percentages of us are environments, you know. So like, I don't, and the, you know, just look at the wealth data. I don't know why people want to look at like labor economics. Labor economics is not going to tell you the true picture. See, there's labor economics and there's stratification economics. So when you look at labor economics, that's kind of what a person can do over the course of their working life. But stratification is over the course is how wealth and the economic situation moves over the course of generations. So if you look at, am I freezing?
No, you good, bro.
Oh, okay. Well, so okay, so you know, we also have to look at like essentially what the brother just said was having control of production. Everybody that you see that's generating an income, that income may not even come from a job. You got people that just generating income from just some type of wealth. Most of our people live in paycheck to paycheck, and that's not through some fault of our own. Just think about your personal situation. Most of us are 1 or 2 generations away from coming out of segregation. My mama went to segregated school. She told me the story when she finally went to desegregated schools, and how all the white students would get on one side. Like there was a big badminton or volleyball game or something. How all the white students went on one side, and they were trying to gang up, and so black students came out, and the black students ended up beating the white students, and everybody put their fists in the air, and you know, kind of how like you know, she told me stories about how when they used to go. One time she went to the circus, and she was sad because my mom was light, my grandma was light, my grandfather was dark skinned. So they sent my grandfather on the other side of the circus, and my mom and my grandmother were on the other side, and neither one of them they were so just depressed and hurt to have to explain that to their child, you know. And growing up and seeing crosses burning, and I mean all these type of things. So I'm one generation coming out of somebody that lived through segregation, you know, in the United States, that lived through.
Crazy.
I mean, you could talk to Adolph's people, see their trauma throughout the years. We're talking about de facto and de jure segregation. Okay, look at our people segregate. Get out of here with that, man. Like you can't talk to me if you're not going to talk about redistribution of wealth.
Look at this brother's comment, man. This is a problem.
Let me check these comments.
This is a problem that I'm seeing a lot, and it's really, really making me upset because people don't get that we're in this thing for group uplift. You understand? Look. I'm gonna read the problem out, and he speaks to the problem, even though he probably meant well, and he didn't know that he made an extreme blunder. The brother said, I bought Apple stock 13 years ago. I bought Facebook stock in 2012. I am a living example of investment building. You keep saying I. That's the problem, brother. You're selfish. We're not talking about what individuals can do, because individual progress does not change systemic problems. We're dealing with a systemic problem. We're dealing with a history of being systematically locked out of wealth, locked out of the access to wealth, locked out the access to capital. Investing in Apple is not a viable uplift program for our people. Investing in the Facebook is not a viable uplift program for our people. Get on board with what we're talking about. We're talking about what needs to happen for our group to get what is owed for them, to rise to where we are supposed to be, to determine ourselves and our destiny. You can't be in charge of your destiny investing into Apple with nothing. I don't know what position or what background.
Middle black family is worth $1,700.
He must not be
middle black family is worth $1,700.
If you're blessed,
if you take out depreciating
in a better space, that's great. But you got to understand our people are in a very, very poor position. They don't have money to invest in the Apple. You don't understand that there's so many of us who don't have money to invest into anything. Understand that.
Let me just I'm gonna just talk about what should be. Like, instead, I think people miss this because we're so used to being on like the bottom of the bottom. We don't understand where we're supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to, think about this. There's no ADOS. There's no ADOS controller in the music industry look at the top of the food chain. Look at the board of directors of all these major corporations. Look at the largest landowner and see how far down you got to go down the list till you get to one ADOS person. Look at the top of, there's no black Steve Jobs, there's no black Bill Gates, there's no black Zuckerberg. None of these people look like us, but when they started some type of big tech boom, none of these people are, there's no, not even that. None of those are top CEOs.
Right.
None of these people started. So if you're thinking about, well, you just invest in Apple stock. Well, if you got reparations, being that you're a smart and gifted person from that standpoint, you probably would have been in this generation if that was an altered destiny, right? You might have been the one that started Apple, or you might have been one that built the company and you bought Steve Jobs out. But because you didn't get reparations, you at the bottom, so your destiny turned out to be, well, you just got some stocks. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Like, if the situation was different, we supposed to be elite. We're not supposed to be bottom feeders perpetually, and then we happy because one or two of us become aberrations or make good choices or have the ball bouncing our way, and one or two of us didn't get caught by the cops, or one or two of us the person that came in front of you fit the description. They pulled him over, so they didn't pull you over and lock you away for 40 years. That kind of stuff.
Now, I just want to pull up, just show us on the screen real quick. This is an article from Forbes. Like, the conversation is starting to change, even though this is an old article from last year. Like, we got to start analyzing this for those people that say that, or we addressed that on the last show as well. Reparations is the hill that we must die on. This is not a solution. And I pray that the brother, he's an elder, I pray that he's listening, because we're not speaking from opinion. This is not what we think or believe. This is what the data shows. And if you have money, then you should be in tune with Forbes and what Forbes says. And Forbes says in their article published January 14, 2019, members of the Forbes 400 hold more wealth than all U.S. black families combined. Members of their 400, not all 400, just members of the 400. So when you're asking me to chip in money to I mean, come on, man. We gotta, like, we just gotta listen.
Think about what he's saying, though.
Go ahead.
I know what you're about to say is fire, but check this out. Look at what he's saying. We need to invest. Like, okay, we're talking about reparations, but what he says is we need to invest into white folks' companies. When you look at what he's saying, Apple is a white folks' company. Facebook is a Jewish white man's corporate company. So our way out of this poverty is investing in the white folks.
I need a flex bomb for that one.
Wow. Wow.
Somebody said you got to start taking calls, bro. Look, let me say this. Y'all could cash at me at Lord Abba as well. My videos are not, we just starting this platform with this particular conversation in this particular space. A lot of my old videos on this channel are my Moorish videos dealing with the history and the breakdown of the Moorish doctrine. That's why I have as many viewers as I have, and I'm able to accept the direct donations via super chat. But those payouts, I haven't received a payout from YouTube yet. So the monies that y'all are sending and donations, honors first and foremost to everybody who is donating, honors that you find value in what it is that we're doing in trying to teach and get across here. I just got to give a shout out to you all, man. Just like, I'm really, really humbled by that. But if you can send your donations to my Cash App, Lord Ab, I would really appreciate that. We're trying to get a new interface, the Roadcaster interface. I want to start taking phone calls. I want to set up, there's this system, they have it like Blog Talk, so that I can actually put the callers in queue and take the callers, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to build that up, family. And again, thank y'all for the donations. It's just our views are not high. So the monies that we receive through Super Chat, I haven't gotten any of them yet from the time we first started the show. But just
share these videos.
Yeah,
go back,
please,
share
click like on the video, share like. All right, we want to move into the next leg of this, but I do want to read from this article real quick. All right, it says utilizing data from the Federal Reserve, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and Forbes rich lists, among other sources. Let me pause there for a minute, because a lot of people, like Ali Bey asked, pull up your sources. All of this aspirationalism, this bootstrapperism, this we can do for selfism, we got to kill that stuff. Government help everybody, while, like I said on one show before, they imagine being in the middle of an ocean and you're drowning, and the government gave all the whites and the foreigners, using those racial terms, and the immigrants, gave them flotation devices to float up to the top of the water. And they were able to climb upon yachts and islands and find salvation on land. Those of you who know the Moorish iconography may understand that reference. But for us, they put 100-pound weight around our neck and we just sunk to the bottom. This idea that we can just chip in is baseless. It has no foundation in facts. It has a foundation rooted in white supremacy, period. So let me finish. It said,
let me just add on to that real quick. Brother. Just one more quick point. And the idea that if you rise the tide, that all the boats are gonna live.
Oh yeah, because
you still didn't take that weight around our neck.
Facts. So
the only thing you're doing is just making the tide higher for us to get back to oxygen.
Facts. That's it. That's all you're doing. So it says the Institute found that the 400 richest Americans hold more. All right, I don't know why that popped up. Hold more wealth, than all Black households, plus a quarter of Latino households combined. Separately, the study noted between 1983 and 2016, the median Black family saw their wealth drop by more than half after adjusting for inflation. Compared to a 33 increase for the median white household. Again, flotation device, heavy weight around our neck. Flotation device for everybody else, weights around our neck. At present, the median Black family has assets of $3,600, roughly 1/40 that of the median white household, the Institute reports. Now let us look at this chart real quick, because this chart is telling. And we're going to move into the second phase of our show after this. This chart is telling, because what it shows us is, if you look, it said between 1983 and 2016, when you look at all statistics, right, it shows, and one of the things that is not really clear on, and this page is unresponsive, that's why that box kept popping up, is what the legend on what the red and blue actually represents. So I'm kind of confused by the chart. I don't know if it is just doing a comparison. Oh, I'm sorry. It does show it. The blue means 1983 and the red means 2016. My bad. So collectively, we see that in 1983, and I want you to look at where it says all, and then where it says black and white, right? Where it says all that in 1983, we see that we see a number, $84,111. And in 2016, that number drops by over $3,000 to $81,704. So we go to the next category. We see white wealth in 1983 at $110,160 in 1983. But in 2016, we see an exponential increase up to $146,984. Now let's look at black wealth. In 1983, I mean, this is nothing to boast about, but at least we had $7,323, right? But now in 2016, our wealth drops to $3,557. Now let's move over to Latinos. And this is important for us to point out for those of us who are ADOS, America's descendants of slavery, those of us who in large numbers were forced to come over here, chained and brought over here to these shores against our will, not people who started to immigrate here after the 1960s and 70s. So it shows that the Latino number in 1983 was at $4,289. But in 2016, it's at $6,591. Now, I want you all to look at the black category and look at the Latino category very closely. How can the people who built the country drop in wealth in 2016 to $3,500, while the people who started to come after the 1960s have doubled that or almost doubled that? While, like, I just don't understand.
I got an explanation.
No, well, definitely. Go ahead, brother.
Well, part of it was because, you know, the damage that was done through the locking out of wealth, through racism, especially through segregated housing, caused, you know, if you look at it, like, again, the statistics said that we lost 53% of the wealth, and, you know, that was lost through the economic crash. And we know that because we don't have a great deal of wealth, the little wealth that we did have was put into home ownership, and then that was the vast majority. And the smaller amount, the lesser amount, was put into retirement through 401ks. Well, what happened in 2008? The housing market took a crash, and the stock market took a crash. So we got wiped out. Now, the reason why white folks bounced back was because they didn't live in all black neighborhoods. They didn't live in they're not suffering from the ills of historic, like, redlining. So when you put, what they did was they made us a contagion to wealth. So when our neighborhoods go down, when the housing market goes down, white folks with wealth, they're not moving to our neighborhoods. So our neighborhoods the properties historically were usually like only gaining like 25% of the appreciation levels in most areas as the white neighborhoods. So if our houses never were going to appreciate at the same level, and when the market took a hit, those houses didn't bounce back. So a lot of people that were still owning homes, they were underwater. That's the ones that didn't have to fall victim to foreclosure, and their 401k is wiped out. So whereas Latinos didn't even, like, they're just, a lot of those people just come into the country. They may be in the house. I'm not trying to, you know, I ain't gonna say that, but, you know, the home ownership levels in that group was not significant as it was with us. So they didn't take a hit. You know, they didn't take the hit with home ownership and then foreclosure and then messed up credit and all of this kind of stuff. And you just kind of stuck, like, with there's a path for upward mobility there. With us, there's no path for upward mobility. We still stuck with the cost of the slavery.
Facts. All right, people, we're going to move to the next leg of our conversation. I didn't know we was going to go on this long on this topic, but I'm glad that we did. It just flowed, because reparations is the conversation. It ain't going nowhere. So I want to start, right? I want to start here I want to start here, and then we gonna have my brother Dr. Logic and my brother Ali Bey really go in on this Reconstruction period. I mean, since I've known my brother Ware L, aka Dr. Logic, he's been rooted in this information. A lot of he used to work at the Lincoln Museum, if I'm saying it correctly, in Springfield, Illinois.
Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum and Library.
The Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum and Library in Springfield, Illinois. So, you know, he was immersed in a lot of this stuff. So, I mean, we linked up and he was already talking about a lot of the Reconstruction information that we touch on this show. And that was years ago. So let me share my screen here. This is what's going on, right? This is 2020 election. Georgia election catastrophe and largely minority areas sparks investigation. Long lines, lack of voting machines, and shortage of primary ballots plagued voters, right? And I'm not going to play the video. Hour-long waits, problems with new voting machines, and the lack of available ballots plague voters in minority counties in Georgia. I'm not even going to go through everything, but I'm going to read this part. This seems to be happening throughout Atlanta and perhaps throughout the county. People have been in line since before 7 a.m. this morning. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, a Democrat, tweeted shortly after polls were supposed to open, and in some case, still hadn't opened. So this is a part of the voter suppression that's going on in Georgia and places like Alabama. In our circle, in our group, the brothers that you see on the screen, we call Sister Stacey Abrams governor in fact, because Brian Kemp stole the election. Like, we just have to be honest. You know, I don't agree with everything that Stacey Abrams stands for right now, but fair is fair at the end of the day. We believe that she won that election. So in our circle, we call her governor in fact, and Brian Kemp is a de facto ruler over this state. Like my brother Ware L likes to call these people down here feudal lords, and that's exactly what they are. He suspended elections for the Supreme Court due to the coronavirus so he could elect the people in the state Supreme Court that he wanted. I'm going to read this real quick, and then I'm going to let my brothers go in. This is from the Southern Poverty Law Center site on voter suppression, which is still prevalent in southern states. It says, as other states offer early voting and various measures to increase access to the ballot box, Alabama has moved in the opposite direction. Voting reform in the state legislature. State governments across the nation are developing new, innovative ways to bring citizens into the voting process. Some have instituted small but effective reforms, such as expanded early voting opportunities or same-day voter registrations. Others have pioneered systematic reforms, such as Colorado's vote-by-mail system. Alabama, however, is moving in the opposite direction, choosing to erect new bureaucratic hurdles and declining to pass popular, common-sense reforms. In 2019, the legislature passed a bill requiring voters to submit a copy of a photo identification with their absentee ballots, complicating the already cumbersome absentee voting process. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State's office focused its energies on an unpopular bill that would give it more authority over the voter purge process. The bill did not pass. Some lawmakers introduced bills designed to bring more citizens into the voting process, yet none were passed and very few were even considered in committee. Voting reform simply was not a priority in the 2019 session. The following is a look at the status. I mean, it goes into this is from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Let me put the page up so y'all can see it. Alive and well, voter suppression and election mismanagement in Alabama, so that y'all can see it for yourselves. Let me close up out of that. Brother Ware L, take it away, brother.
Absolutely, man. I just want to frame it like this. We've been doing a lot of talking about reparations, and I just want to get us to understand something, right? We understand the loss and the economic pain and suffering that we have gone through, but we really need to understand the historical process of what happened and understanding what we need to do and what we need to get in line with and track down the origin and the root of how we got into and how we have, because it wasn't supposed to be like this. So after like I said before, we won the Civil War, right? Chattel slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment. It changed. They could not own property in men no more. So what happened after private bondage ended? We got public subjugation. How did we get public subjugation? And that's what is bringing this conversation that we're about to go in this half of the show. I am of the opinion that with reparations, we also need to start an initiative through the states, particularly the 11 former Confederate states specifically, but all states in general, but it's centered in targeting these states because of the historical atrocities that have happened by these state governments. When Reconstruction happened, before I go in on that, I want to read something. Let me read something to frame what I'm about to say to you. So I'm introducing you to an old white ally by the name of Judge Albion Tourget. He invented a term, or he popularized a term back in his day called colorblind justice, and he was the lawyer for Homer Plessy in the Plessy versus Ferguson case that created separate but equal, which was one of the precursors to segregation, Jim Crow, and all those things, right? So this is what he said about the Civil War. He said, in all except the actual results of the physical struggle, I consider the South to have been the real victors in the war. I am filled with admiration and amazement at the masterly way in which they have brought about this result. The way in which they have neutralized the results of the war and reversed the verdict of mathematics is the grandest thing in American politics. Amazement, because such an outcome was not inevitable or foreordained. Because in the end, Reconstruction did not fail, but was overthrown with impunity and audacity in one of the bloodiest, darkest, and still least known chapters of American history. This is what we have to start with. We have to understand that we need a new Reconstruction movement. Reconstruction, if we don't understand it, was about what the Southern states needed to do to be readmitted back into the Union, making people whole. That's Reconstruction was supposed to include our reparations. That's when reparations was supposed to happen. But we didn't get that. We got poverty, homelessness, and public subjugation. So we have to, because we were well prepared. So they try to make it seem like during that time, all of us, the majority of the 4 million were these illiterate, foolish, feeble-minded Negroes who couldn't think and do for themselves. And we were like these childlike individuals who needed white father figures and parents, right? And so this was not the case. We had very intelligent and amazing people. And why are their monuments not up down south? Instead, you got Jefferson Davis Highway, and you have Robert E. Lee Elementary School and things like that. But you don't have Hiram Revels as a monument everywhere. You don't have Prince Rivers in South Carolina. He should be the most famous man in South Carolina. He was the most amazing man in South Carolina history. And if you're from South Carolina, you should know who he is, right? These are the heroes of that time. But there was so many more. You have to understand, during Reconstruction, there was a period called the Year of Miracles, where more freedmen were elected to local and state and even to the U.S. Senate. They called it the Year of Miracles. You had all of these brilliant minds being elected to office. What happened? Less than a generation later, they were assassinated. We had domestic terrorists who had state government sanction, just killing us with impunity. 85 years of lynching. So during the Reconstruction process, these state constitutions were supposed to be redone. They had requirements on ratifying the Reconstruction Amendments, which is the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, but they were supposed to be redone in a way that, you know, made sense for everybody, that included the freedmen and created some type of social equality, because the 14th Amendment said we were supposed to get equal protection under the law. So this is what was going to frame that world that we was going to live in. But we got assassinated. We had a criminal president, Andrew Johnson, who they called the accidental president because he was never supposed to be president in the first place. But when he got into office, when Congress was at recess for 9 months, he used his executive powers to remove the man who was in charge of the Freedmen's Bureau. He reinstated and created a safe space for these convicts, these criminals, these rebels who were legally not supposed to participate or have representation in the way that he gave them. He made them provisional governors, and the governors put all of they, in street terms, all of their homies right back into play. You understand what I'm saying? And then just created a horrible nightmare for us to live in. Now, I'm going to come back again with some more stuff, but I know I've been talking for a minute. I want to let my brother Ali, or who else want to come in, before I start talking more about the necessity of a new Reconstruction initiative.
Before you go in, Ali, I just want to say, you know, just we had a conversation earlier, and it's crazy. Our conversations that we have just never kind of translate into the conversation we have on the show, because we think about time and all of these different things, et cetera, right? But it was a really powerful conversation. And one of the things that we talked about with HBCUs and all of these different things that needed to be named, no doubt, we're gonna pull that up. That, you know, renaming of these things, right? Because I'm not gonna jump the gun on the HBCUs. I'm gonna let my brother Ali Bey go in. But the point that we gotta stress is the legitimacy of Southern government. These people are rebels, and Reconstruction was about a civil war. It was just about a civil war, and they lost that physical war. They lost it. They had to give up their property, as they called us, but they made life hell for us. They held captive, as Mitch McConnell and the Republican-controlled Senate does today, held captive American politics so that we would never really advance in any meaningful way in this nation. They rewrote history with the United Daughters of the Confederacy. So the things that we learned even in Northern schools came from the revisionist history of the South. We need a new Reconstruction, and I'm let my brother Dr. Logic go into that, but he spoke on the show about a constitutional convention. We need a new amendment as well, and I think that's something that we should have a discussion about, because the 14th and 15th Amendments were designed to bring the South back into the Union. It didn't really hold them to a standard of justice or being just. And so I believe, and I could be wrong, and I would even be corrected by my panel members as the thought just hit me, that we need a new amendment that needs to be broad and clear, along with our reparations, because you're not going to stop a racist from being racist just because you have money. You're not going to stop the South from enacting racist legislation because we have money now. They're still going to try to make things hard for us. They're still going to try to do that. So I'm gonna let my brother Ali Bey go in. I see that he has something that he wants to share to the screen.
Yeah. I think one of the things that Bob Johnson has said that was interesting to Charlemagne was, you can't stop a racist from being racist, but you can legislate in order to be able to control people's actions.
Right.
Like for instance, earlier we were talking about, I don't know if the conversation arose out of us talking about quote unquote black on black crime statistics. But I know one of the things that we were talking about was the fact that the Ku Klux Klan, for instance, a group of white men who were basically criminals and terrorists, they had to enact through Congress a piece of legislation called the Ku Klux Klan Act. You can look, people can look this up, the Ku Klux Klan Act. And the reason that they put this particular act into effect was because of the criminal behavior of white men under the guise of this organization called the Ku Klux Klan. So in terms of how that relates to that organization and how that relates to our upward mobility or lack thereof coming out of the Reconstruction period, I just want to read something from history.com. Hold on a second. I want to read something from history.com that's dealing with the Freedmen's Bureau. And this particular section of this article is called Freedmen's Bureau's Successes and Failures. Let me know if you can see this. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's up.
All right. So this thing says the Freedmen's Bureau was organized into districts covering the 11 former rebel states, the border states of Maryland, Kentucky, and West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Each district was headed by an assistant commissioner. The Bureau's achievements varied from one location to another and from one agent to the next. Over its course of existence, the Bureau was underfunded and understaffed with just 900 agents at its peak. Bureau agents who acted essentially as social workers and were frequently the only federal representatives in Southern communities were subjected to ridicule and violence from whites, including terrorist organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan, who viewed the agents as interfering in local affairs by trying to assist blacks. While some agents were corrupt or incompetent, others were hardworking and brave people who made significant contributions. During its years of operation, the Freedmen's Bureau fed millions of people, built hospitals, and provided medical aid, negotiated labor contracts for ex-slaves, and settled labor disputes. It also helped former slaves legalize marriages and locate lost relatives, assisted black veterans. The Bureau was also instrumental in building thousands of schools for blacks and helped to found such colleges as Howard University in Washington, D.C., Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. The Bureau worked in conjunction with the American Missionary Association and other private charity organizations. Additionally, the Bureau tried with little success to promote land redistribution because that was a part of the Bureau's name. A lot of people don't know, dealing with the abandoned lands by the former Confederates. They were supposed to be redistributing that land to the former enslaved people. But accordingly, it was unsuccessful. However, most of the confiscated or abandoned Confederate land was eventually restored to the original owners. So there was little opportunity for black land ownership, which was seen as a means to success in society. Let me just say this, because I know I talked to y'all about one of my friends, a good brother of mine, by the name of Nile Rodgers. Now, he's a multi-millionaire, right? Successful producer, songwriter, written a lot of hits for people over the years, from his own group, which was called Chic, to people like Diana Ross, Madonna, you name it. There's a bunch of hit records that this man has written and produced over the years. Multi-millionaire, you can look him up. He and I were talking maybe 2 days ago on the phone, and I speak to him pretty often. And we were talking about the situation that's going on right now in terms of the protests, and it was a post that he made on Instagram, and he started getting some flack from European Americans about him posting the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And so as we were talking about that, we went into the conversation of reparations, Reconstruction, and so forth. And the interesting thing that Niall told me was that his family was one of the few black families that got land during the redistribution of that land at the time of Reconstruction and were able to hold on to that land. His family still has the land that they got during the time of Reconstruction. So as I was reading this, it just made me think of it, because it says that the Bureau tried with little success to promote land redistribution. However, most of the confiscated or abandoned Confederate land was eventually restored to the original owners. But now it's telling me that his family is one of the few black families that were able to hang on to the land that they got during the time of Reconstruction. So I'm trying to get back in contact with him maybe tomorrow to see if he would be willing to come on and talk about that particular aspect of his family's history, along with the fact that he also expressed to me that he's 100% for reparations. Now, mind you, again, as we were talking about Ice Cube, we were talking about Bob Johnson, you know, who was the other people? Oh, Byron Allen. You know, you could even throw in there some of the stuff that Gabrielle Union was saying in terms of the limitations of black celebrity. You know, this kind of stuff is important when you have people who are worth millions of dollars in terms of their net worth telling people who don't even have what they have of the importance of of our people being able to move into a place of economic equality.
Powerful.
And so let me just say this, because they talk about the Freedmen's Bureau starting Fisk University. So that led me into another piece. So as I was looking up Fisk University, let me switch over. I'm gonna stop sharing this, and then I'm gonna switch to this other screen about the history of Fisk University, because this is an important piece to what we were talking about. Hold on a second. Let me just get to this. Where is it at? I think this is it here about Fisk. All right, so let me make this a little bit bigger. People can see it. Now, this is the history of Fisk University from 1865, the end of the Civil War. Barely 6 months after the end of the Civil War, and just 2 years after Emancipation Proclamation, 3 men, John Ogden, the Reverend Erastus Milo Kravitz, and the Reverend Edward P. Smith established the Fisk School in Nashville. The school was named in honor of General Clinton B. Fisk, a European American of the Tennessee Freedmen's Bureau, who provided the new institution with facilities in former Union Army barracks near the present site of Nashville's Union Station. In these facilities, Fisk convened his first classes on January 9, 1866. The first students ranged in age from 7 to 70. They had common experiences of slavery and poverty and an extraordinary thirst for learning. So let's go a little further. This is interesting because at some point we got to have the conversation about religion and how religion plays its role in how we move as a group. That's right. Important too. We got to touch on it, and it's going to be sensitive, but I'm just going to say this. The work of Fisk's founders was sponsored by the American Missionary Association, later part of the United Church of Christ, with which Fisk retains an affiliation today. Ogden, Kravitz, and Smith, along with others in their movement, shared a dream of an educational institution that would be open to all regardless of race, and that would measure itself by the highest standards, not of Negro education, but of American education at its best. Pardon if y'all hear sirens in the back. I'm in New York City, and that's what happens. Their dream was incorporated at Fisk University. So now let's go to this, right? Because this is really interesting, and I think this goes into what we were talking about earlier about how certain people tend to be do-for-selfers and bootstrappers based on the idea that they can somehow gain upward mobility through entertainment, right? And so many of our people look to entertainers, right? So let's look at the history of entertainment and how entertainment helped Fisk University. The tradition of excellence at Fisk has developed out of a history marked by struggle and uncertainty. Fisk world-famous Jubilee Singers originated as a group of traveling students who set out from Nashville on October 6, 1871, taking the entire contents of the university treasury with them for travel expenses, praying that through their music they could somehow raise enough money to keep the doors of their debt-ridden school open. The singers struggled at first, but before long, their performances so electrified audiences that they traveled throughout the United States and Europe, moving to tears audiences that included William Lloyd Garrison, Wendell Phillips, Ulysses Grant, William Gladstone, Mark Twain, Johann Strauss, and Queen Victoria. To this day, each October 6th, Fisk pauses to observe the anniversary of the singers' departure from the campus in 1871. The contemporary Jubilee Singers perform in a university convocation, and conclude the day's ceremonies with a pilgrimage to the grave sites of the original singers, where once again the old songs are sung at the burial places of their first performers. So this is interesting because as far back as 1871, we see Black people not being able to depend on the government. Now, remind you, Fisk University is started as an institution by the congressionally instituted Freedmen's Bureau. Yet the school was so debt-ridden because the government would not continue to undergird it the way it needed, that the Black people in the school had to put together a singing group to go around and make money to try to keep the school open. And that's what actually ultimately happened. So this history of us using the performing arts, whether it's singing, rapping, dancing, playing ball, whatever it is, us using the arts to sustain ourselves because the government refused to undergird us in our endeavors, has a history going back all the way to Fisk University. I just wanted to put that because I thought that was a very interesting and telling piece of the history regarding the Freedmen's Bureau. So I'll stop.
That's interesting. I mean, well, we find the roots of it, right? The entertainers leading the way, and that's we definitely have to do a show on that one day, man. That the religious element of the early HBCUs, which are all named after European Americans. You know, I want Martin Luther King Jr. University.
Not most of them,
most of them, but I think a lot of the beginning, if I'm not mistaken, the ones that started earlier were named after, like Howard was named, you know, but Howard, I want Martin Luther King.
Howard was a general or something in the Union Army. And he was the leader. He was the one in charge of the Freedmen's Bureau.
Okay.
And they started Howard University in his honor. And a lot of it did have to do with religious instruction. A lot of people don't know that, but it's true.
Yeah, I want to see
the so-called domestication of the Negro, so that he's able to function inside of European society.
That's right. No, I want to see a University of Moorish Science, Noble Drew Ali's University of Moorish Science, right? The Malcolm X School of Islamic thought, because we have Islam on this land too during the times of slavery.
We got Malcolm X College in Chicago, bro.
Okay. Oh man, how did I miss that one?
Yo, I wanted to say this though. When we talk back to like the Reconstruction piece, right, and a lot of the things that were supposed to happen that didn't happen, you know, Abba mentioned the 14th Amendment. I want to say this, right? I don't really think that there's anything wrong with the 14th Amendment. My problem with the 14th Amendment was it wasn't enforced, and there was a lot of reasons why. The chief among them was Andrew Johnson's total lack of any concern for the freedmen, right? He told the governors, the provisional governors that he put into office, basically, yo, just write me once y'all get it settled. He had this, I just want to get things back to normal attitude, didn't start with COVID. Right. This was with the Civil War. All of these today's problems really can be traced back to the Civil War. He just wanted the country to get back to normal. Normal has never been good for us. So the more people died during the Civil War than any war in American history. So they just was so limited in their ability to actually enforce these Reconstruction amendments. They were just basically amendments on paper. There was no enforcement of law behind them. So there was no way to actually provide equal protection under the law in any real meaningful way, as far as manpower and authority and like law enforcement agencies. They just didn't have it. Two, the state governments totally didn't care nothing about that. They were all about states' rights, and they didn't care what the federal government said. The entire Civil War was fought because of states' rights versus federalism. They didn't want the federal government in their business, and they said, we'll be damned what they legislate. We will always be superior. And a couple shows ago, I read one of the speeches from the provisional governor Perry of South Carolina, where he said just that. So that is to me, the crux of the situation. The crux of the problem is rooted in the fact that we were never able to really participate in Reconstruction the way that we were supposed to, it was intended for us. The 14th Amendment to me, is a good amendment as it reads, but it's had no enforcement, still not being enforced today. Because if we had equal protection under the law, we wouldn't have to have any type of Black Lives Matter movement or anything like that, because we would have equal protection. We would have justice. Justice has always been the issue, and injustice has always been the problem. And we dealing with real domestic terrorism. You understand? It's hard to do politics when you're being threatened by gunpoint, literally.
That's
being
right.
threatened at gunpoint. When it's hard to do politics when your locally locally elected officials and state elected officials are being assassinated in scores. You can't do for self in those kind of situations. You can't. This is for the do for selfers. You can't do for self when prosperity can get you killed. When you live in a society where prosperity is life-threatening and dangerous. So in order to get ourselves on track, and I think that really our ancestral obligations and to honor our ancestors properly, we need to have a legacy that's rooted in honoring the freedmen, because we're American descendants of slavery as the institution, but we are literally the descendants of the freedmen and women that came out of chattel slavery. We are the descendants of the freedmen, right? And that legacy needs to be honored. That legacy needs to be fought for, because what was supposed to happen for them never happened. And we're just living in a continuum of harm ever since then. That's and right. If their offspring don't fix it, we just gonna pass that harm down to our children, and they're gonna pass it on and pass it on. We have to fight for the freedmen's legacy, which was a real Reconstruction, where there was political justice, social justice, and economic inclusion. Dealing with the government, our fight is with the government. Andrew Johnson vetoed the first civil rights bill and Civil Rights Act in 1866. They had to do a veto override.
That's right.
He appointed all of those provisional governors and put all of the Confederate criminals and rebels back into power when Congress was out of office. He fired General Stanton without any congressional authority, and he did it all like a coward and like a criminal when Congress was at recess. This is why he's the first president to be impeached. So we have to understand this stuff, and we want to go to the root of the problems. Reconstruction was never done right, and what was reconstructed was a hell for us here in America.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something else too in regards to that. Today we see through recent events, and I think we talked about it before, through recent events, I feel like that there's some improvement in the sentiment, the public sentiment in regards to reparations. I feel like that, we see white people or European Americans on the street protesting today. A lot of them that were on the fence, so they were screaming, well, we just need to do stuff for everybody. Some of those people are like, yeah, now, I think we need to do something specific for Black folks. So being that that's the climate, I've always, just looking at Reconstruction, and when you read and see how those few people who were fighting, they were like the people who were abolitionists before the war, they were fighting the abolitionist fight for a long time. And then the war happens, and they're like, okay, we did the war, we've been fighting this political fight. Then you see how afterwards, all of that just was like, it's like the war was won, but the peace was lost, and all of the fight that they had before, outside of emancipation or private bondage, it seems like it was all for naught. And so then we see through was it the Compromise of 1877 that pretty much sealed the fate? I think that was like signifying where a lot of that fight was just given up, and we hadn't seen a whole lot of it since. So I would say today, like, we need to have where the white abolitionists at? Like, what we need, all those people that's talking about Black Lives Matter now, y'all need to be the new abolitionists. Y'all need to be on board.
New John Brown.
Yeah.
Where's John Brown's at?
Where the John Browns at today? Because
There
if
you
you're
go.
not serious about this thing, man, then I'm not trying to hear none of it. But I want to add this in real quick.
And when you're done, bro, I just want to say something to go a little further about the 14th Amendment and Andrew Johnson's
Definitely
attempted veto of the 14th Amendment and why it didn't work. But go ahead.
I want to read this real quick from my new favorite book, The Bloody Shirt. This is just a crazy history right here. Right?
Real quick, let me just add in this one more point I was trying to make. In Dr. Darity book, he said he traveled across the country. He's been speaking on giving this reparations talk for a while, and he says he's noticed like the conversation has shifted from you crazy, that will never happen. We should definitely not do that, to the conversation switching to well, tell me, how can we do that? And maybe the conversation is switching a little bit more now. But what he said when the European Americans are asking, what can we do to help? Well, he's saying, because it's going to take an act of Congress to do it. For those of you watching, and you thinking it's something that we need to do in the courts, it doesn't work like that. It has to be an act of Congress. So if that's going to be the case, and we know we don't have any wealth to buy any politicians or make that stuff happen, his advice is to form PACs and fund your PACs to fight on our behalf for that reparations legislation.
That's right.
That's what you can do. Take your wealth, like you do with other causes, put it into super PACs and all that, and use that to advocate for Congress to enact reparations. So that's all I wanted to add. But go ahead.
I just want to read this real quick because like I said, this is the second leg of this show, and we coming up on our time. But it says this. It says I'm gonna start here. There was but one possible consequence. A superior race is put under the rule of an inferior race. They offered a stark warning. We do not mean to threaten resistance by arms, but the white people of our state will never quietly submit to Negro rule. This is a duty we owe to the proud Caucasian race, whose sovereignty on earth God has ordained. No free people ever, declared a speaker at a convention of the state's white establishment a few years later, had been subjected to the domination of their own slaves, and the applause was thunderous. This is a white man's government, was the phrase echoed over and over in the prints of the Democratic press and the orations of politicians denouncing the tyranny to which the oppressed South was being subjected. A bald fact: more than 3,000 freedmen and their white Republican allies were murdered in the campaign of terrorist violence that overthrew the only representatively elected governments in the southern states, known for 100 years to come. Among the dead were more than 60 state senators, judges, legislators, sheriffs, constables, mayors, county commissioners, and other office holders whose only crime was to have been elected. They were lynched by bands of disguised men who dragged them from cabins by night, or were fired on from ambushes on lonely roadsides, or lured into a barroom by a false friend on a prearranged signal shot so many times that the corpse was nothing but shreds. They blew them to pieces, or pulled off a train in broad daylight by a body of heavily armed men resembling nothing so much as a Confederate cavalry company, and forced to kneel in the stubble of an October field and shot in the head over and over again at point blank range. These people are savages, and it is incumbent upon us to bring this history up, because this reparations fight is going to bring out these people who are storming state capitals with their AR-15s and AK-47s that say that, these people shouldn't get nothing. They're going to threaten their own politicians, their own senators, that if you vote for this, you won't get our vote anymore in re-election. And I believe that it is the federal government job to bring about a new amendment.
They left us
We
hanging.
need Reconstruction starting in 2020. That's something I believe that should be on the ballot. Reconstruction for ADOS in 2020, and this includes our reparations. Point blank, period. Point blank, period. Yeah, go ahead, brother Ali, and then brother Where.
Let me say this. Andrew Johnson was what you would call a devil.
Straight.
Right? Was a devil, right? Because what he was trying, all that what you just read, what he wanted to do was enable that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big part of the reason why he attempted to veto the 14th Amendment as it was proposed by Congress. So let me just read something about the 14th Amendment, but that a lot of people don't know. The 14th Amendment, if you read sections 2 and 3, everybody's used to reading the first section dealing with citizenship.
2 and 3 out of the 20.
If you know, that's the
Oh no, that's the 13.
20.
That's the Moors that promote the 1320.
But the 14th Amendment, a big part of the reason why the Confederate sympathizers, the Confederates and the Confederate sympathizers have a problem with the 14th Amendment is because it disenfranchised them. So that argument about the 14th Amendment not being legitimate is an old one that goes back to the time of Andrew Johnson, and a lot of the states actually rejected the 14th Amendment initially. So, but now look at this. Let's read section 2. I tried to share it. I don't know if you see it.
Yeah, it's up.
All right, so look at what section 2 says. I think we read this before, but I think it's important to go back over. I'll try to do it quick. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age and the citizen of the United States, or in any way abridged except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. That's one. Now they're giving you a hint by saying, except for participation in rebellion. So look at section 3. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state's legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So the 14th Amendment, Section 3, actually disables all of those Confederates who either participated in a rebellion or gave aid to anybody who participated in the rebellion. This is a big part of why they didn't want that amendment to be passed. But let me just read this, right? This is from a note. Huh?
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead. You go in.
This is from a note that I did on the 14th Amendment a few years back. A section of it, I say here in short, a bill is the form used for most legislation and requires the president's signature of approval. However, only joint resolutions may be used to propose amendments to the Constitution. And in this instance, it does not require the approval of the president. The process that the person I was writing this in reference to was erroneously referencing something that pertains to a bill and not a joint resolution, because what he was trying to argue was that the president vetoed it. And I'm trying to explain to him that Andrew Johnson, as the president of the United States, had no right of approbation or to veto the joint resolution proposing the 14th Amendment. Although he complained that the joint resolution was not submitted to submitted by the two houses for presidential approval, he was mistaken in his apparent understanding of that particular process. And so you can read his message to the Congress in 1866. I can provide the link for that. But the fact of the matter is, when you do the research, the Congress doesn't need the president's approval to submit this bill for passage. Not for no constitutional amendment. They don't.
That's right.
That's powerful, and that's why.
Powerful.
See, I'm glad you read that, because this language, I like, this is really evidence of criminal activity.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And that's why I like the 14th Amendment, because you can see clear violations of every letter in the violated. Andrew Johnson violated, putting people who active participants as governors, and they put their co-conspirators and co-corruption, all that. They all taking power. But as my last, little spiel, I know time is running out. I just want to talk about two things that I saw in the comment section. One, I just wanted to speak about Brother Martin Luther King. I always have to come into his defense and clarify things, because there's so much confusion about Martin Luther King. He was not killed for using his First Amendment, right? His freedom of speech. It was a lot of people doing a lot of talking. Talking ain't what got him killed, because Martin Luther King did more than talk. Martin Luther King got shit done. You understand? It was his ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner, which means this man was a powerful man. That's what got it done. Out of all the people's favorites, Martin Luther King, most of the modern people who pay attention to these movements, they don't really reference King. But let me tell you how much King got done and how much the others didn't get done. Martin Luther King spearheaded the Civil Rights Bill, spearheaded the passing of the Voting Rights Bill, spearheaded the Fair Homes Act, right? The Fair Housing Act. This is federal legislation this man done in a few years. You understand? You can't name me no other man who in modern history who was that hands-on and instrumental in passing that much legislation. And that's not even all the stuff that he done. I could go on and on about the things that he got done. So it wasn't no First Amendment. He wasn't just no man that was out doing a bunch of talking. He did a bunch of walking. We got a lot of famous orators out there who are famous for nothing but speeches. Martin was a man that got things done and pulled people together in the way and saw and envisioned a future for us like no man after him has ever done. No man in his time who was with him had the depth and the insight to see and do. So I just wanted to say that about the brother Martin. I get a little fired up when I talk about Martin Luther King, but we have to understand that. And I then went on and forgot about what the other thing that I went. Yeah, the Fair Housing Act back in 1968, but it was the death of Martin Luther King that brought. He was fighting for that, but it was the death of Martin Luther King that brought the pen to paper. Yeah, because they was burning things down in America, and Lyndon B. Johnson said, "Man, what can I do?" And that was like his farewell gesture for Brother Martin. But
did y'all want to talk about Operation Breadbasket in Chicago?
I don't know if we got the time. I gotta go. There's so much to talk about.
It is, and
we gotta shut it down.
Yeah, we didn't. I want this subject. I wanted to go into so much more about, because I really wanted to flesh out how this thing can happen. It's not just like some idea. Well, it's real political work that needs to be done on a local level. And when the comment said that we always have suffered from a state rights philosophy, the only way to fix that is in this day and time with the numbers and the abilities that we have now is to get over involved in state politics. We have to fulfill the legacy of the freedmen, and it was rooted in state politics, right? The states that we come from, we need to be represented proportionally to our numbers in those states. So out in the future program,
next show right there, or one of the future shows, Redress, Reconstruction, and Reparations. So instead of just talking about Bob Johnson we went on for about an hour and 20 minutes, and I thought it was a good conversation because we got into what we get into. That I think that should be the title of the next show. Redress, Reconstruction, and Reparations. That is a perfect title and for a show. Shout out to Sister Cynthia McDonald at ADOS Chicago in the building.
Down. Yeah,
oh
man.
yeah, and y'all go check out her show too.
Oh yeah,
I
definitely.
believe it's called the 13th or something like that.
Yeah, post the name of your show in the chat.
Y'all go check her show
so I can put it up on the screen.
And let's not forget, because people keep talking down on civil rights activism. The fact of the matter is, you had even people like A. Philip Randolph, and the fact that he pressured Harry Truman into desegregating the armed services. Like, these people did real work, man. Like, they had access to presidents and stuff like that. Like, it's not just lip service from the side and yelling for a separation and all of that kind of stuff. It's real work. These people have real documented work that you could look at and say, man, these people put that time in, they put that work in. Like the brother who wound up becoming the Supreme Court justice.
Marshall, Thurgood Marshall.
Thurgood Marshall. That brother put in work even before he came a Supreme
superhero.
Thurgood Marshall. Arguing landmark cases. And so I just want people to understand, like, all of that talking, man, that doesn't mean anything, man. These people did real work, man. They put in real work. Like, it's real. It's legend, man. That stuff is legendary. I don't like it when people talk down on the civil rights activists, because they put in real serious work. Yeah. Everybody in the country still to this day benefits from. The Nation of Islam benefits from the work that people like A. Philip Randolph and people from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference put in. They benefit from that. That you can go around the country, even people like Wesley Muhammad go around the country traveling. You staying at different hotels because of the work that people put in to be able to desegregate that stuff. There's times when was a time when them people didn't want you in their hotels, but you're able to do that now because of the work of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So I don't think people don't, I don't think they understand the depth of what these people did. You know what I'm saying? I just want to say that.
Yeah. So before we break out, I just want to remind people about the books. People always ask us what books we coming out of. The first book I would tell y'all to go get. Hold it up. I know go get this.
That bloody shirt, man.
And go get this one. The Red Record by Ida B. Wells. Yo, I think somebody, Jaja was asking, where can you get more information at Real More? I asking Ali where you can get more information about the crimes of Andrew Johnson. They're all over the place. You can literally Google it and it'll show up all over the place.
Andrew Johnson and Google Andrew Johnson and the failure of Reconstruction.
Yeah,
a host of articles should pop up for you, sis.
Yeah, but get the red shirt, everybody. Get the bloody shirt. Bloody shirt.
Another book you want to get is From Here to Equality by Dr. Sandy Darity and A. Kirsten Muller.
And let me just give her a Supreme Court case that she can use. The Supreme Court case of Hollingsworth versus Virginia. This is from 1798. The president's approval was not required for ratification of an amendment. This was decided by the United States Supreme Court in Hollingsworth versus Virginia, 1798. Look that up.
Definitely. I'm supposed to have when it got the babies. Like,
I gotta roll out.
All right.
I'll see y'all next time.
I mean, man, this show is fire. Another fire show. I want to give a shout out to my panel, my Be the Power team. Again, if you want to, like I said, we want to start taking phone calls eventually, and maybe we'll dedicate one day a week to that, because sometimes we just be going in. We got so much information to share. We could literally talk for another 2 hours based on everything that we was just talking about, and then probably get into another subject for another 2 hours, because we be in our zone having our conversations. I want to say thank you to everybody that's listening in. If y'all want to help us, like I said, I haven't received the payouts from YouTube for the super chats. I don't know how that works. I stopped even thinking about it. So if you want to directly donate, if you can, because I don't even be asking about donations and none of that stuff. I'm just so passionate about teaching, but I do want to expand the platform, promote the show a little bit more, take out YouTube ads. I want to start streaming to Instagram as well. Instagram has a lot of traffic with their live shows as well. And you could cash at me at Lord Abba. I'm gonna. Matter of fact, it's in the description of the YouTube. I can put it in the chat right now also. And if you're on Facebook, you wouldn't be able to see what I just put in the chat, but it's $ Lord Abba for anybody that would like to assist. For anybody that would like to assist, thank you all. We're gonna end with the, our mantra: don't just fight the power, become the power. And then you're going to have the power to make a change. And right now, we are noticing a change in the power. I got articles that I didn't even get to bring up that I wanted to bring up tonight. Federal court denies immunity to cops who shot a man over 20 times and cites George Floyd. Maybe we can get into that on another show, because Darity in his CNBC interview spoke to eliminating qualified immunity. Right. And I had this article pulled up before I actually watched that clip from Darity. And I'm like, these things are just lining up and falling in place. You cannot escape our justice claims anymore. It's in everyone's faces. So with that, I say peace, peace.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.